Okay, so coming up next, we have a live fireside chat, Unlocking the Creator Economy Through Embedded Finance. We'll have Claire McKeith, Group Executive, Chief Executive Officer, Talent House, Tom Bentley, Chief Commercial Officer, Vodino, and Lisa Moyle, Moderating, Director of Strategy and Co-founder, BC Innovations. So Lisa.
Thank you, Flora, and hello, Tom and Claire. It's so great to have you here. And I couldn't think of a better way to end what has been 2 action-packed days, but pull together some of the themes that we've been discussing across the 2 days. So technology, embedded finance, communities, and how better to serve communities. So in light of that, I want to pass over to you, Claire, to talk to us a little bit about your community, because it's quite unique.
Thank you. I think it is unique and it's large. So what we have is this creative powerhouse, and we have that through the amalgamation and merger of 5 platforms. So Talent House has been around for about 10 years, co-founded by the lovely lady in the front row, Maya Bogle. And we've then subsequently bought additional platforms that have the same purpose, that purpose being how to help creatives thrive economically and socially. So we first purchased Zupa, then Elo, Javoto, and IM. And so we've got this wonderful amalgamation of over 14 million members across 195 countries. And out of that, over 3 million are professional creatives themselves. So it's a really great place to start. And what we do for those creators through our technology is give brands the opportunity to engage digitally with those creatives to produce content. And so really moving away from a pure agency model, allowing for that engagement. And that works incredibly well for the Warner Brothers, Procter & Gamble, Porsche, Snapchat, Facebook, and the likes too. And really, again, fueling that mission to democratize creative content. We really do believe, and it was I think the impetus for the business at the very beginning, that a great idea can come from anywhere as long as you're passionate and you're creative. And through technology and the digitization, that fantastic work can get out there and it can reach a really broad audience and capture the Warner Brothers of the world's attention. And you can have your artwork featured on the next, a super blockbuster hit, like the new James Bond movie that we worked on too. So it's a really great enabler, and what I'd say is there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of excitement around the creative economy, and we're in a really interesting place because that's the market that we serve, and I think we've got a really particularly dominant position in that.
Exciting. I had a peek at your website, and there is some amazing names, but content and creative stuff on there. So tell me, Tom, a little bit about Vodino, but also where do you fit in this picture with, this massive creative community that Talent House has brought together?
Sure. So Vodino was created as a banking as a service platform, essentially to meet the challenge of embedded finance in the 21st century. And the way that we do that is the following. One is that we actually have a banking brand called Ion, and that is where we have the regulation, the compliance, and that allows us to passport and embed our services that obviously are highly regulated, highly compliant. And then the flip side of that, we have Vodino, which allows us to essentially provision that technology. So when you start to think about embedding into these communities, we'll talk a little bit about our relationship with Talent House in a second, but thinking about sort of that API-first strategy, what does that mean in terms of that contextual digitalized journey? So it's that sort of marriage of, all the trust, all of the proper details that come with owning a banking license, married really with the technology story. And what's, so fantastic about this relationship and, what Claire has conveyed that you have within the Talent House community, empowered by fantastic creatives, not only in a professional lens, but also those trying to get on the ladder, get themselves noticed. When we start to think about embedded finance and where we want to take those banking landscapes, I don't think you can think of a better use case. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, we talked about democratizing the sort of journeys around that. So, traditionally it's a sort of high agency, high cost kind of access point. Here anyone can essentially be a creative and get their work noticed. But also when their work does get noticed, how do you invoice and go through that financial journey? I remember when I was a professional DJ, the first time I had to create an invoice.
I don't know why that got a chuckle.
I had to get that in there. Sorry, Claire. But no, just going through that journey of, creating the invoice, creating the business account, going through the payment infrastructure. For many creatives, it's probably the last thing on their mind when they come to this context. So with this partnership, which I'll let Claire talk a lot more in terms of detail, because of that architecture, that infrastructure that we've built, we're able to not only provide that banking landscape for sort of the clients and customers of Talent House, but we're also able to kind of turn the dial on what those journeys can mean. If you think about sort of the creative story, and Claire, shared with me some really interesting use cases, it takes time for people to get paid. It takes a lot of time to go through that procurement process with these big bands. So anything that removes that friction, we're able to power that is really, really exciting.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from both of you about the partnership that you've announced. And I think it's just a really great way to bring embedded finance to life, right? So can you talk us through, Claire, what you're bringing to your community with this partnership?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, looking at the community that we're serving, I'd say, this is a really good time to be engaging with Vodinos of the world and further institutions as well in order to provide these services to our community. Because what we're seeing is a creator economy changing quite stratospherically over the past few years. It is growing exponentially and it's becoming increasingly more diverse. And what you have is a shift from what happened yesterday, where if a brand wanted to engage with a creative, they'd go to an agency. And it was quite rare and only on the fringes that you'd have some freelancers that were able to survive. But with the digital economy coming into play, what we have is quite a few changes. We've got platforms that can help that engagement rather than having to have people involved with that engagement with creatives. You've also got really fast tools now. So to be creative is much easier today than it was yesterday. With your phone on your camera on your phone rather, people can take phenomenal photography. And we've seen that in spades. And there's great apps in order to digitize photography. And through that, we're seeing this incredible explosion of creativity. But with that explosion, how are those creatives actually able to survive economically when they don't have their agency to take care of paying them every month, dealing with their taxes, covering their insurance, God forsake a pension? How do we then help them to get that financial security alongside the financial freedom that freelancing gives them? And that's really where LOU comes in. And I'd say the partnership that we have in order to ease the payments, really providing that seamless transfer of money from the brand to Talent House and onto the creative, it's just scratching the surface. It's just the very beginning of what we're trying to do for this phenomenal community out there. And to give you a sense of size, we're talking about the creative economy being about $2.25 trillion in size. It's not that niche and it's not that small. And we think it's even larger. That last number was from 2013, where gaming was really small. And looking at gaming alone, if anyone's an avid gamer and everything going on around the metaverse, there's so much more demand for creative content in order to fuel that trend as well. So we want to be able to offer so many additional services, whether it's around accounting, raising invoicing, all the SME services, insurance, as well as then on to the creative needs that they have as well. And I'd say very much Vodino shared that vision and understanding of our community.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think what's so powerful about these partnerships is, that's a fantastic vision, it's a fantastic mission. But let's not forget we're dealing in the ecosystem of financial services where, you need to have a compliant license, you need to go through all the loops and, kind of processes that come with that in terms of being a regulated entity. So this is where the partnership's very powerful, because I believe it allows the talent house community with LOU really to focus on that creative journey, that creative customer. In the background, it enables us to ensure that, customers trust us as mutual brands with their money. It also allows us to make sure that we provision the right credit, the right kind of functional tools based on the profile of those customers. And probably most importantly, I think we can help people along those journeys. So, there's a lot of noise around data and what that actually means. In this context, not just taking financial data and proposing that as financial product. Here, it's about, understanding people on that journey. What are the things they need to look out for? Not just the bigger agencies, but also the wider pool and the wider demographic that these guys are targeting. So it's these sort of powerful tools that we provide through the technology, and then utilizing, the IP and the brain trust of Talent House with their 10 years of experience. I mean, I don't believe you could ask for a more targeted mission statement to really solve this issue.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. And when Claire speaks to the sheer size of this community and the opportunity, so, we're democratizing access to being a content creator. And on the other side, you're providing services that, many freelancers wouldn't know how to navigate or do so efficiently. What's involved in this first phase of the project, of the partnership?
Sure. So we're not going to reveal every single detail because, we're creatives. We like a few surprises along the way. But, I think Claire hit the nail on the head in terms of that payment ecosystem. So looking at sort of easing that financial journey when people come to make payments, when they look at the way in which creatives, transfer money to one another. And of course, at an agency level, as Claire mentioned, Talent House has some of the biggest names in the world. If you log on the website today, you'll see the Venom poster from Marvel. You'll see things around Willy Wonka and all sorts of other kind of creative outlays. So for us, it's about kind of the marriage against that. I would say from a Vodeno perspective, what's really important for us is, working together to target the right demographics to really launch that in the appropriate way. I think this is really and fantastic, and thank you so much to Claire and Maya's time, to come and talk about this proposition. Because really for us, this is about getting the fintech community really excited about what's coming, but it also opens up a real layer cake to talk to different brands, talk to the wider financial ecosystem. The buck doesn't stop with Vodeno. We absolutely, want to create the banking landscape, the open architecture. But as Claire mentioned, there's plenty of different outlays, there's plenty of different toolings that can come into this ecosystem. So for me, this is really about announcing the beginning of what I believe is a very exciting partnership with lots of the miles done in terms of the build of the solution. The next stage is now really opening up to the creative community and seeing how they can help with that journey.
Great, and without giving too much away, and I won't ask any questions that ask you to reveal anything you don't want to, could you just give us a sneak peek of your ultimate vision for LOU? Is it providing that full suite of services and beyond for your community?
Absolutely. I mean, we are creator first. I think we position ourselves always very much on side with the creative. How do we help them? How do we help them access opportunities, make money, increase efficiencies on that flow, and really help them on that enterprisation journey that they're on. But we do believe in the power of collaboration as well. We see that within our community. Some of the best projects are projects that, a team of different creatives have worked on together across different continents at times as well. And so we want to help our competitors. We want to help other financial institutions who have a specific angle. We want to help make sure that this is a really tight, perfect suite of services all through this open access network that Vodeno have perfected, and then be able to take that onto market as well.
And I would say one thing that's come from the conversations with Claire and the team is it's making the experience as personal but as authentic as possible. And what I mean by that is, there's a huge amounts of different facets within the creative community, but finding authentic services that actually deliver benefit rather than just pushing product. That for us, I think, is a really important mantra of kind of where the solution is going. But also I think it's really key that we're iterative, so we can actually work at those different components at different times. I think the key around, tech that really breathes and lives within these ecosystems is that they change with demand. So one of the most exciting things for us now is actually to get the product in people's hands, to get them testing it, and to making sure that it has real end state value, I believe is really key.
Absolutely. And just to put it in perspective as well, we didn't just build it and go, okay, they're going to use it. We actually started this project 18 months ago. And we started that by asking our community, we have that access point to say, what is it you need? How do you currently get paid? What tools are you currently accessing? What are your struggles? And it was a sizable exercise because we got, over 10,000 respondents to that. And so we were quite knowledgeable before we set out to find the Vodino of the world on what it was that we needed to solve for. And I think this has been a perfect marriage because they understand the end goal. They really understand that it is about that creative and how do we deliver that authentic and effective solution.
Yeah, and I would say there's not many use cases like this ever, because you've got the uniqueness of the banking license. You've got a very particular community this is servicing. But think about the proposition. It's not just creating a white labeled app. It's got a very unique targeted business case. And you've seen that the likes of Coconut in terms of the way they look at renters and the way that you look at kind of different propositions and the way that they build kind of services. But this is more than just the financial. This is very much around curating those experiences. And ultimately, I think it's about, that day-to-day lifestyle. How do you, in the same way that we use LinkedIn, the same way we use different creative tools, I mean, from a financial services perspective, it's sometimes very easy to have the blinkers on. And I think this is where the embedded banking sort of ecosystem is going to really evolve. Because I think, for us, it's all about providing the right landscape that people can interact into financial services. But to the point that Claire just made, they need to have a very unique story in order for them to be trusted. And I think this is where I believe that we're going to market with something really, really interesting. But at the same time, in terms of the evolution of that, listening to that consumer market, that's not just about your card, your product, your interest rate. It's more about that. How do they feel about that journey? It's more about actually the emotional journey they go through. So that's going to be really exciting, I think, as we start to learn from that.
And I'd say what was, I think, maybe a little surprising was how the safety element was so critical as well to that community. You're talking about people who are probably not as financially astute as say, targeting, bankers. Yet the most important thing to them is my money going to be safe, which intuitively obviously makes sense. And that's what this provided us with the Aon Bank behind it.
So speaking to that point that you both mentioned around trust, so you've built the trust of your community by providing them access to opportunity and so on. Do you think then that's really enabled you to bring that to the next level and provide them a financial product or service?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think what we're very quickly able to do, and again, it's the scratching the surface element, is offer them a better way to receive their money. Because currently, they get paid through PayPal, or it might be a bank wire, but it's typically through PayPal. And that's not a fantastic way for them to get paid, especially when it's an episodic payment that's being made. It's not consistently $100 every other month.
Yeah, I love the example you gave the other day, which was bands. You go and see a concert, you see a guitarist, they put down the guitar. I always have this vision of cash in hand at the end of the night or getting paid the next day. I think you mentioned creatives can take 3 to 6 months to get paid. And the management of that process, all these things that you wouldn't think about in terms of that job title, but these are day-to-day challenges that creatives have.
Absolutely, and ultimately we want to give them that visibility on their earnings, so having that dashboard where they can see where the money's coming from and when it's coming in. And so we're not married to this just being a payments option for the cash that they receive from Talent House. It's a payment option for creatives to receive cash from anywhere and really be able to visualize where that money's coming from. And I think tooling them up with better visibility and better access points is just going to help them thrive and really help fuel that creator economy and the freelancing capabilities, which isn't our entire community, to be clear. We have this huge community, but only half of them are freelancers. The other half are independent entrepreneurs or micropreneurs. They're 1 or 2 people in a studio. But they really have a high demand for financial capabilities and freedom. They're not being targeted by traditional banks at all because they don't have a great track record and they're new and they're young. And equally, they really need that help. And so we're very much targeting that additional services that we can get in order to give them the right SME or SMB services loaded into this framework too, around accounting and insurance, etc. They all really need that.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic example of that inclusion piece, giving
Yeah.
people not just what they need, but what they didn't even have access to previously. And before we go on to the last question or two, just a nod to our virtual audience. I know Flora's looking if they have any questions, or if anyone has any questions indeed in our physical audience. Just put your hand up. You guys are happy to take a couple questions.
Any questions? Okay, great.
Of course you would.
Question for Claire. How did you come about to think about embedding financial services into your organization? And how did you find Vodeno, not being in the banking space?
Yeah, for sure. 3 things to that. Number one, I come with a financial background. I've worked in private equity for over 20 years. So I've worked across lots of different types of industries and had a fair bit of knowledge. And one of the reasons I loved getting involved with Talent House, and started that journey 3 years ago, was the fact that they had this great creative community. It was about 1 million in size at that 3 years ago. We've amassed it through organic growth and acquisitions. But how do we make their lives better? And I couldn't believe when I first was working with Mine in particular, and we had this backlog of creator payments that we were trying to clear, that they were asking to get paid through PayPal. I just thought that was archaic. I thought that was something that happened on eBay. This is professional services. This is money that we're transmitting from the likes of, Sony Music. How can this be? And even worse, I couldn't understand why in the US, we were not only having to pay some people through checks, because that's what they preferred, but we were receiving money in checks. I didn't think that still happened. In the US, it's still big business. So at that point, we're going, okay, the financial world has evolved since then. How can we embed that into our capabilities? And so the first thing we did was we ran a very diligent survey. What do you want? How are you currently getting paid? So we got that information back. And with that, we were then able to put together a pretty robust RFI. And we launch that last summer, the middle of COVID, why not? And we asked over 80 companies to respond to that across the various needs. We had a list of, it was about 25 Nikkei managed to compile, of needs that we had to address the requests from our community. And we got about 30 companies came back, filled out this 30-page report that we'd asked them to. And just working through all of them and targeting the demographics that we're looking at, because it obviously was specific in different markets who we needed. I'd say Vodeno were the first ones that we really felt that alignment of interest in what we were trying to achieve and why we were trying to achieve it. But they could also offer this open network whereby it's not this service and then get everything else elsewhere. It's, okay, we can create a framework and have APIs to provide additional services as well. And I must admit, the people were great. And that really does make a difference when you're interacting with them quite a lot in order to get something done. Having people you can work with is an incredible and important part of it.
Payment after the thank you. Thanks, Claire.
Okay.
Any other questions? So turning to, this is really for both of you. I mean, there's been so much conversation across this stage and, in fact, every stage about embedded finance. And thinking about, the community you're working with Talent House and Claire, where do you see it growing in the next 2 years? Will it be trusted brands, trusted platforms, trusted communities who will be the deliverer of financial products and services rather than, a high street bank?
Sure. I'll let Claire maybe talk about more the explosion and what that means for different brands and different ecosystems, but to kind of talk about the players and sort of how we look at it. I can't stress it enough. Having a banking license probably was the game changer when we came to discuss the future needs of a talent house, for example, because ultimately it's that compliance, it's that regulatory story, and it's quite a hard thing to do. I mean, we raised, close to $420 million in order to build that banking infrastructure, which is a very hefty sum, right, to bring this vision to life. So I would say that from an infrastructure perspective, I think you'll see more players emerge, more banks dipping their toe into the space, But essentially that culture point that Claire made, which is so important. I mean, yes, we hope to be nice people, and everyone in this room hopefully hopes to be a nice person, but it's actually being open for business, and banks aren't known for doing that. So it's more beyond the marketing, more beyond the press in order to create that ecosystem. And secondly, in terms of sort of brands and sort of what we see, look, I mean, this is a very strategic, but also a very brave move from Talent House. You know, you would have heard a lot today around banking as a service. Everyone's kind of jumping on the as a service train to some degree. But in terms of coming together and kind of thinking at these customer propositions, you know, you need to create the new entity. You need to think about what that means in terms of regulatory risk. Obviously, we take on the responsibilities from a banking perspective, but Talent House now have a whole new dimension of what people are trusting. So for me, I think we'll see a lot more brands moving into the space, but I wouldn't say it's for everyone. It's quite a unique game. I think it's going to be all about those brands who have trust. I think it's going to be about those communities who have particular problems to solve. As Claire's framed a fantastic one within the creative community, where that's one vertical among many that we're targeting. And I think finally, you know, if you look at the spirit of partnership, you know, my favorite phrase is, you know, transformation is a team sport. And I think many of the brands you've seen in the room today, you know, from the biggest to the smallest fintechs, you know, they're going to have to work together to kind of solve some of these ecosystems. But I think essentially they are going to come together and create, whether it be revolving credit for, you know, a particular industry, whether it be to, you know, help younger people dynamically work through their finances as, you know, it gets harder to get on the mortgage ladder, for example. But within insurance firms, or the way they look at kind of how they add context to that journey, that's where I think we're going. Claire?
No, I would agree. For us, we're incredibly focused on that creator economy, that passion economy. It's flavor of the month. It's fueled by the what's going on in the metaverse or Web3. And so there's just that increasing demand that we're going, how do we continue to solve the problems that are there? And that those problems that exist within our community and our platform, they're replicated in every other one as well. So how do we work collaboratively with them to solve those problems? Because they're not going to go away, they're just going to continue to increase. And we think this is a really neat way of solving that problem. And, you know, we're going to learn how to make it better. And, you know, we've dipped our toe in the water now, and we've launched on continental Europe. And, you know, we'll just continue working that way. And, you know, we've identified partner in the US as well now. We'll be able to launch that early next year. So really helping to fuel the solutions that are required within the creator economy.
I love that idea of problem solving and collaboration, and that collective notion of partners coming together to deliver those solutions that really can make a difference to the way people work and live.
Absolutely.
Which is a fantastic note on which to end, unless anyone else has another question.
There's actually a question from the virtual audience.
Are we happy to take a question from our virtual audience?
Yeah.
We want to be inclusive.
Okay, so Phil is asking what fintech models are working to help creatives raise funds before a project a la GoFundMe. Will DeFi change this?
So I think the question's on fundraising and you know, creatives getting onto this. I mean, I from a kind of lending perspective, I think what's interesting is as we collect more data on individuals, as you look at open banking, you know, essentially you can make much more intelligent decisions. And I think that's going to help power brands, you know, such as Talent House, who kind of get first look at these creative outlays, because essentially, you know, people's talent really comes from organically getting their hands stuck in and building out those models, building out those relationships. So for me, it's all about the data and being able to make wise decisions. But I don't know if you want to answer that from a Talent House perspective.
Yeah, I do agree. And I think you do see a trend of some neobanks sprouting up in the US and a couple now here in Europe as well, fueling that trend of looking at the data and then being able to provide invoice financing fundamentally, especially around the influencer models. And I think that's a good service. I'm not knocking it. It's needed. I think cash today is more important sometimes than cash tomorrow. We will be looking at those solutions ultimately as well, but I think we wanted to have a little bit of a different starting position of how can we just help them get the money that they've already earned as quickly and as cheaply and as seamlessly as possible, and then we'll go out and layer on the additional services too.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to start chipping away at that $100 every time with a fee structure. I think it's really trying to create that cost-effective positioning immediately.
But that being said, though, I think from a GoFundMe, essentially, musicians need instruments, creatives need Apple Macs or any other computer brand that may be out there to be responsive. But, the way that you fund these things, I think traditionally, they've been funded by credit card, bank of mum and dad. I think if you think about brands and the way they are to create wider services against that actually add value, whether it be access to creators or access to lessons or access to portals. I look at things like Masterclass and how they're sort of changing the game in which they provision those sort of gifts and sort of contextual advice at a very high level. So I think you will see these worlds merge, but it'll be interesting
But I
to
think
see.
you'll see a layer of crypto going on and blockchain in order to really be able to help monetize that initial investment and return to that investor as
We
well.
won't get into the NFT conversation now, Claire.
Not yet.
We'll never get to a drink. No, I'm joking, but
It's
absolutely
been asked
spot
on during a number of sessions today, and we will definitely have you back to talk about that at another time. So thrilled that we were able to talk to you about this recently launched partnership. So thank you both to
you.
Talent
Thank you
House
so
and
much.
Bettina and Claire
Thank
and
you, Claire.
Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you to the audience, both physical and virtual. Don't go anywhere yet. Well, you can leave this room, but I suggest you go upstairs and join us at the Tribe cocktail party, where you can try, amongst other things, a Cryptopolitan. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom, Claire, and Lisa, for joining us and sharing your insights. And I think that was a perfect panel to close with embedded finance. So it has been a pleasure to work on this event, and it has been well worth to bring together such a brilliant community. So I hope to see you all next year. Thank you.